I knew something was off the moment I saw my name scrubbed from the Creighton calendar invites. Not just skipped, removed. Color-coded tags gone. No transition updates, no legal check-ins. For 12 years, I was the name clients trusted before signing anything over 8 figures. I was the final pass-through before Creighton Financial's risk team greenlit a merger. And now? Some red-faced junior associate named Kellen was owning the workflow. Except Kellen still printed PowerPoints on portrait mode and thought NDAs were optional for contractors. Ethan's fingerprints were all over it. He started showing up at 6 Mile AM sharp, like punctuality could compensate for ignorance, slamming his Yeti tumbler on glass conference tables like we were all just lucky to witness his grind set in action. Finance podcast in one ear, AI-generated pitch decks in the other. He called me legacy personnel in a partner meeting, to my face. Mitch chuckled. I did not. But I kept my head down. At that level, noise was the enemy, results weren't. And my results had teeth. Creighton didn't just trust me, they depended on me. Clause 22.1 had my name printed into the contract. I was to remain transition lead until merger finalization, unless removed with written client consent. That clause wasn't vanity. It was there because in 2019, I caught a loophole in their derivative exposure terms that saved them $14 million. They remembered that. Ethan didn't. Mitch, for whatever reason, had started acting like Ethan's shadow. Or maybe Ethan had become his handler. I honestly couldn't tell anymore. Quick note before we dive deeper. If you're listening right now and this story's got your attention, please subscribe and like the video. 97% of listeners never do, and it seriously helps more than you know. Keep stories like this coming and motivates the hell out of our team. Okay, back to it. My desk hadn't changed since day one. A single legal pad, color-coded binder tabs, one framed photo of my mother in her nursing scrubs. The woman who taught me how to fight by being unshakably prepared. I never posted my wins online, never chased visibility. But when it came to client contracts, no one bled more ink for precision than I did, until Ethan started streamlining. He called a lunch meeting, which meant lukewarm raps and barely disguised power plays, and unveiled a reorg map. Efficiency restructuring, he called it. Said we'd be reducing redundancy and optimizing legacy roles by reallocating responsibilities to younger associates with bandwidth. Translation, he was gutting my role like a fish and feeding it to 3 clueless boys who still used Google Docs for red lines. I pushed the printout of Creighton's contract toward him. Clause 22.1. Removal of the named transition lead without client pre-consent constitutes breach. I said, calm as bone. You don't get to unilaterally restructure them. He didn't even glance down. They won't care, he said, sipping his sparkling water like he'd just invented leverage. No offense, but you're kind of background noise now. Mitch didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared out the window like he was watching the stock ticker scroll across the horizon. I went home that night and removed the kill switch delay on my credential vault. I didn't want to burn the house down. But if they torched the foundation, I wasn't going to sit in the rubble with a smile. That was Friday. Monday morning, 6:12 a.m., I was in the glass conference room. The badge barely scanned before the door unlocked. Ethan sat there like he was born into the chair. Hair too perfect, suit too slim, breath smelling like mint and hubris. Your services are no longer required, he said, like he'd practiced the line in front of a mirror. We'll process the separation today. Your desk will be cleared by noon. I nodded once. Understood. No tears, no shouting. No, after all I've done. Because here's what they never saw coming. At 6:19 a.m., my badge clinked quietly onto the marble reception desk, and at 6:20, I sat in my car, opened my personal phone, and typed one email with surgical clarity. Subject line, Clause 22.1, Transition Violation. Body, per Creighton. Financials contract, Section 22.1 has been activated. Please advise next steps. I am available to initiate compliance secure transition upon request. Creighton legal copied. Attachments, time-stamped credentials log. Merge readiness doc. Exit protocol. I hit send, sat back, watched the sun creep up behind the parking structure. At 6:22 a.m., all access linked to my credentials auto-revoked. Vaults, red lines, client memos, compliance archives, everything Creighton needed to close their 240 mad motor merger. And at 8:30, they realized no one else had the keys. Lunch was served with a side of betrayal. Ethan had the gall to call it a collaborative vision session. We sat in the executive lounge, him, me, and two of his hand-picked rising stars who looked like they still needed GPS to find the compliance folder. They nodded along like dashboard bobbleheads while Ethan laid out his grand idea: efficiency restructuring. He said the words with that smug inflection consultants use when they're about to torch a department for fun. "You've been doing exceptional work, no doubt," he began, which was corporate speak for pack your things. Then he started sketching on the whiteboard like he was unveiling the cure for cancer. Bullet points, arrows, buzzwords like agile load sharing and distributed ownership. I watched, silent, as he drew a line through my name and replaced it with a question mark. "We'll have Kellen, Tanya, and Adit split transition duties. That way, no single point of failure." I waited until he capped the marker, then slid the Creighton master agreement across the table like a dealer laying down a straight flush. Clause 22, subsection 1. Creighton contractually requires that I remain their transition lead until completion or until removal by written client consent. You remove me. It's breach. Ethan didn't even read it. Just smirked, leaned back, and took a swig of his $11 kombucha. Honestly, they won't even notice your background noise to them. You've been a ghost in the room for years. Mitch didn't say a word. He just stared down at his untouched sandwich like it was about to bite him. That's when it hit me. This wasn't Ethan going rogue. Mitch had signed off. Or worse, he didn't have the spine to stop it. I excused myself before I did something I'd regret. But my hands shook as I walked out, not from fear, from calculation. Ethan didn't understand the machine he was poking at. He thought I was a cog. What he didn't realize was I built the damn gearbox. Back at my desk, I sat down and opened the kill switch protocols I drafted 6 years ago, back when a different partner hinted I was too integral to lose. Funny how security works both ways. You want a clean exit strategy? Draft it yourself. I had protocols tied to every high-value account, including vault access, encrypted file ownership, and contract timestamp trails. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. By 3 p.m., my personal vault was backed up, my exit node linked to a single trigger time, and every compliance memo I authored was auto-tagged with a metadata hash pointing directly to my ID. That wasn't vanity either. That was insurance. Still, I gave Mitch one last chance. I knocked lightly on his door. He looked up, startled, as if seeing me for the first time in weeks. "I need to confirm something," I said. "You're aware of Clause 22.1 in Creighton's file?" He swallowed, nodded once. "We've reviewed it. Reviewed. Not respected, not honored, just reviewed. Like a sticky note someone read and tossed. That was all I needed to hear. It's wild how fast 12 years of service can be shaved down to a headcount slot in a spreadsheet. No farewell, no transition meeting, no courtesy exit call. Just Ethan with his startup grin and a calendar block that said, "Discuss reorg, phase 2. I started timing my workdays like a bomb technician. Every move measured, every handoff logged. I gave the juniors what they asked for, but not what they needed. Because truth was, they didn't even know the right questions yet. They thought copying folders was the same as understanding them. Thought renaming files was equivalent to rewriting regulatory precedent. They didn't know that Creighton's entire merger filing depended on one final compliance memo. A memo that wasn't even generated yet. A memo I kept on a local node, encrypted and nested behind a 2-tier credential trigger that only I could activate. Because I knew this moment was coming. I didn't know when, but I felt it months ago. The way Mitch started double booking me, the way Ethan used redundant like it was a personality trait. So I stopped updating the shared archive, quietly, precisely, and started writing the real thing where only I could reach it, not to sabotage, but to protect. Because if they were going to fire me, they'd do it without understanding what I actually did. And when they did, I wanted that ignorance to be expensive. The hallway lights flickered on as I stepped off the elevator. Empty, sterile, that strange pre-dawn hush where everything feels too clean, too still. I wasn't surprised he'd picked that hour. Ethan liked dramatic symmetry. Probably thought firing me before sunrise gave him some kind of alpha mystique, like he was sealing a billion-dollar deal instead of gutting the one person who knew how the machine ran. The door to the glass conference room was already open. No assistants, no HR rep. Just Ethan in a tailored suit that screamed finance cosplay, nursing a cold espresso and tapping at his tablet like he was too busy to ruin someone's life. "Have a seat," he said, not even looking up. Like this was a doctor's appointment. Like I was just a cavity he needed to drill and forget. I didn't sit. "You've been instrumental to the firm's growth," he started, which was code for, "This'll look bad on LinkedIn if I don't throw a compliment." Then he slid a single-page document across the table, my termination summary. No severance, no reference offer, no handoff timeline. Just, effective immediately, desk cleared by noon, access revoked upon exit. I scanned it slowly, not because I needed to, I could recite it from memory, but to let the silence stretch. Let him feel the air tighten. "Your services are no longer needed," he said again, louder this time, almost like he needed to believe it himself. "We'll process the exit today. Thank you for your time with Barclay and Cole." I nodded once. No theatrics, no shouting, no emotion, because emotion is what they expect from you. It's what they weaponize. Cry and they call you unstable. Fight and they call you aggressive. Stay quiet and calculated, they don't know what to do with that. So I gave him nothing. I turned, walked out, heels echoing through the glass halls like a countdown. At the front desk, I pulled my badge off its lanyard, the same one I'd worn through 12 winters, 10 mergers, 6 internal investigations, and 1 office fire, and laid it gently on the marble. The receptionist, bless her heart, looked like she might cry. I gave her a small smile. She mouthed, "I'm so sorry." I wasn't. By the time I reached my car, the sun was still nowhere to be seen. My fingers didn't tremble as I unlocked my phone. I opened the Creighton folder, selected the transition memo template, tapped Send. Subject line, Clause 22.1, Transition Breach. Initiated body, per terms of the Creighton Financial Agreement, Section 22.1, I have been removed without client pre-consent. This constitutes a breach. Please advise how you'd like to proceed with securing transition protocol. My credentials remain valid through 6:22 a.m. Eastern. CC, Creighton Legal, Mitch Barclay. I hit send. Then I watched it go, watched the little check mark turn blue, watched the silence begin. Inside the firm, my credential node ticked down its final seconds. At 6:22 a.m. sharp, the access log closed. By design. That wasn't revenge. That was procedure. Clause triggered, auto expiry. They could scream all they wanted. It wouldn't help them. Legal wouldn't untangle it, because the clause was the help. And I was the only one who knew how to interpret it in practice. There was a version of me, maybe 5 years ago, who would have sat in my car sobbing, who would have spiraled through self-doubt and panicked job searches, wondering how I'd been made obsolete by a man who didn't know what a derivative lockout clause was. But that version of me didn't write transition protocols. This version? She drafted her own exit in ink before they ever saw it coming. It started with a whisper, like most implosions do. Kellen wandered into the conference wing, holding a half-eaten granola bar and looking like someone had just asked him to solve a math equation in Sanskrit. He mumbled something about a missing file and access issues, while Tanya stared at 3 red error screens stacked on her dual monitors like digital tombstones. By 8:30 a.m., the whisper had turned to panic. "Where's the final memo?" someone asked. "Check the archive server." I did. There's nothing there after version 6. That's impossible. The merge-ready version was finalized last week. Who finalized it? Silence. I wasn't there to see it, but I know exactly how it went. Because I built that system. I trained those juniors. And I watched for months as Ethan ignored every procedural briefing like he was too evolved for nuance. The compliance memo they needed? It wasn't in the cloud, wasn't in the archive, wasn't anywhere they had access to. It lived in a private credential node, one I encrypted and logged under my ID only. Redundancy was a myth when you were the one writing the logic. Ethan never asked where final stage drafts were stored. Never thought to map credential dependencies. Why would he? In his mind, if it wasn't in a Slack thread or Notion dashboard, it didn't matter. So when he sat down and punched his admin override code into the node server, probably with that same smirk he wore when he signed my termination, the system responded exactly as it was programmed to. Access denied. Then a red prompt blinked across the screen. Credential owner deactivated. Attempted unauthorized override logged. Node locked pending legal flag. 3 minutes later, IT locked the entire compliance vault. Standard protocol. Ethan triggered a breach flag without even realizing it. That's when the shouting started. He stormed into Mitch's office with Tanya trailing behind him, eyes wide, laptop clutched to her chest like a shield. I'm told he was still trying to explain how it should have just been in shared drive when Mitch finally cut him off. "Did you even read the Creighton contract?" Mitch asked. The room went dead quiet, because that was the moment they all realized. The people Ethan promoted, the systems he broke, the confidence he oozed like aftershave, none of it came with comprehension. Creighton's merger deal, a $240 million cross-border consolidation, hinged on that final compliance memo. Without it, regulatory review would stall. Cross-jurisdictional risk wouldn't be flagged. And the 5-day deadline for secure filing? That clock was now ticking, loudly, and no one knew how to stop it. Kellen offered to draft a new memo. Tanya said she'd pull old templates. Ethan said he'd loop in legal. But it didn't matter, because they couldn't just fabricate 12 years of precedent, audit trails and subclauses crafted across 3 continents. They didn't even know which version of the filing required which regulation tags. The language mattered. The metadata mattered. Hell, even the font spacing mattered. Creighton's internal counsel once rejected an entire compliance set because the margins weren't 1.25 inches. Meanwhile, I was at home, sipping a burnt espresso in my kitchen, watching the clock and waiting for the next ping. I didn't enjoy their confusion, but I did feel a calm clarity I hadn't tasted in years. Not spite, not revenge. Proof. Proof that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. Proof that being thorough isn't outdated, that loyalty isn't something you replace with a slide deck. Inside the firm, Mitch was already on the phone with Risk. Ethan was refreshing his inbox like the right email might save him. And the juniors? They finally understood what it meant when people said, "She held this place together." They just never asked how. They thought they could brute force their way through it, that if they moved fast enough, spammed enough inboxes, looped in enough juniors with vague action items, they could outrun the silence. But silence doesn't move. It waits. And at 9:17 a.m., it was waiting in Creighton's inbox. First came the flurry of Slack messages, all time-stamped, frantic, and identical in tone. Anyone have Coulson's compliance memo? Did it ever get uploaded to Confluence? Can we draft a new version today? Then came the emails. They reached out to Creighton's transition lead, their assistant, their regulatory counsel, their M&A liaison. Every name they'd ever seen CC'd on an email thread, like shotgun pellets hoping to hit something vital. But Creighton didn't answer, because Creighton knew exactly what was happening, and they weren't going to help fix it. I had warned them. The memo wasn't a document. It was a protocol, one Creighton had asked for. One I had built alongside their legal team with 2 levels of encryption, a key pair system tied to their approval node, and a disclaimer that required a verbal confirmation before unlock. It wasn't hidden. It was written in bold across the final folder, open only with client consent. Inside that folder, one file remained visible, read only, non-editable, dated and signed at 6:12 a.m. Clause 22.1 breach protocol initiated. Contact client representative for secure transition. Ethan read it 5 times, hoping the words would magically change. They didn't. By 10 a.m., the team had tried contacting their own legal counsel. The juniors were printing old drafts, drawing arrows, trying to guess what the final version might have said. Tanya cried in the bathroom after a partner barked at her to just write something close enough. Close enough? This wasn't a bake sale. Creighton's compliance arm didn't do close enough. Meanwhile, Mitch was pacing in his office, trying to reach someone, anyone, at Creighton. They weren't ignoring him. They were letting him sweat, because they didn't owe him an explanation. They owed me one. And I had already given them what they needed, a timestamp, a trigger log, and one digital breadcrumb that proved they had been breached. The firm kept trying to open the encrypted folder anyway. IT tried bypassing the key pair. It flagged the breach again and locked them out of the node entirely. 10-minute delay timers started popping up. Internal security pinged the risk team and asked if this was a cyber incident or a protocol error. Nobody had answers. Ethan, in a last-ditch effort to save face, tried forwarding the read-only file to Creighton with an apologies for the inconvenience note. The email bounced back. Address blocked. It wasn't just a technical lockdown, it was intentional silence. That was the part they couldn't understand. That, after all their noise, after all their bluster and boy wonder arrogance, Creighton didn't reply with anger. They didn't reply at all, because they didn't need Barkley and Cole anymore. The team couldn't say that out loud. Not yet, but they felt it. You could see it in how they stopped asking questions, stopped looking for files, and just sat at their desks, eyes on screens, waiting for instructions that wouldn't come. And the file? The one I left behind? It didn't rant. It didn't accuse. It simply stated a fact. Clause 22.1 was violated. The transition protocol belongs to the client. Contact them, not us. Documentation, after all, doesn't lie. It just waits to be respected. At exactly 10:43 a.m., the implosion arrived in the form of a single vibration on Ethan's phone. He was mid-sentence in a containment call with half the junior team and two of the firm's compliance advisors when the notification lit up. I imagine he didn't even think before unlocking it. Just that same nervous twitch that came anytime he suspected someone else was about to solve a problem before he could. But when he read the subject line, everything stopped. Creighton notice of intent. No fluff, no warning, no soft preamble or legalese cushion. Just clean, surgical text in the body of the email that cut right to the bone. Effective immediately, we will continue all transition efforts under the advisement of Mr. Coulson. Barkley and Cole is no longer authorized to represent our interests. There was a pause. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just confusion. Dead space, like the audio cut out and no one was sure if they lost connection or just lost control of reality. Ethan's voice faltered mid-word. Tanya looked over his shoulder, lips parting. One of the compliance advisors quietly began closing his laptop like he didn't want to be here when the roof caved in. Mitch sat across the table. For a few seconds, he didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared at Ethan like he'd never seen him before. Like he was finally seeing the full cost of letting ego outrun expertise. Creighton didn't just pull the plug. They rerouted the power. To me, the memo was secondary at that point. The breach flag, the locked vault, the missing documentation, all of it now became background noise to one thing. Creighton was gone. Not negotiating, not requesting transition support. Gone. And they'd gone with me. The room descended into that peculiar flavor of panic corporate people always try to bottle behind dry words. Unfortunate, unexpected, regrettable. But panic has a smell. It's in the sweat behind collars, the white-knuckle grip on tablets, the furious tapping of a muted keyboard as someone tries to type their way out of a fire they lit themselves. Legal didn't say a word, because they were already on the phone with Risk. They'd seen the clause. They knew what it meant. This wasn't just reputational. This was financial. Clause 22.1 wasn't decorative. It had a downstream trigger. Creighton's exit would set off breach penalties, trigger performance clawbacks, and, most importantly, invite scrutiny from other clients watching closely from the sidelines. Because clients always watch. And nothing screams incompetence louder than losing your biggest account by email. Ethan tried to speak. Tried to spin it as a reactive posture shift, which might have worked on someone who hadn't just watched him delete the firm's most critical relationship with one stupid, smug decision. But there was no air left in the room, no belief, no trust. Mitch finally spoke, voice low, dry, almost detached. "How long have you known about this?" Ethan stammered. "I didn't know I thought she was..." He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't say my name. That's when Tanya excused herself. No explanation. Just stood, nodded, and walked out. The meeting ended without a conclusion. There was nothing left to conclude. The memo they were so desperate for? Irrelevant now. The deal Creighton was closing? Proceeding without them. Under my advisement. All they had left was the echo of a locked folder and a legal clause they never bothered to read until it detonated. And me? I hadn't said a word. Not since the morning, because silence, when wielded properly, does more damage than 1,000 memos ever could. It didn't take long for the cracks to spread. Creighton's departure wasn't just a loss. It was a message, one that echoed through every corridor of Barkley and Cole like a funeral bell wrapped in velvet, the kind of silence that makes people lean in, afraid to breathe too loud, afraid to ask what happens next. By 2 watts p.m., 2 more clients had requested contract review. By 4:30, both submitted formal transition withdrawal notices. Neither cited specifics. They didn't have to. Everyone knew what it meant. Clause 22.1 was radioactive now. The moment Creighton pulled the pin, it triggered what the firm liked to call contingent fee dependencies. Fancy words for, if you violate the contract, you lose the money. 30 days of billables, gone, non-recoverable. Legal tried to argue it, of course. Some desperate motion about gray areas of clause interpretation. But the language was mine. I had written it with Creighton's general counsel, line by line, to avoid exactly this kind of wiggle room. There was no gray, just breach and cost. Internally, Mitch called an emergency partner summit. No one leaked what was said, but by morning, half the client strategy team was on review hold. Ethan's calendar went blank. His podcast's Instagram quietly went dark. The Thought Leader Thursday post that had been scheduled with a grinning photo of him in front of a whiteboard? Deleted. Somewhere between the second withdrawal notice and the board's legal debrief, I received an email with the subject line, Strategic Opportunity, Droy and Lind, Creighton's longtime audit and advisory firm. The one we'd occasionally bumped up against in regulatory scopes, always respectful, always sharp. They'd heard. Of course they had. This industry doesn't do secrets. It does murmurs in marble hallways and CCs that don't belong. The offer was brief but decisive. Partner track, lead transition strategist, full autonomy, a multi-year scope starting with Creighton, and 2 more clients already prepared to move if I said yes. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I downloaded the PDF, removed the signature metadata, and attached it to a new email. To Mitch Barclay. Subject. Offer no greeting, no body text, just the file. Let him read it. Let him feel it. Let him understand in slow, dawning horror that I wasn't coming back. Not to fix it, not to explain, not to rescue them from the fire Ethan set and Mitch let burn. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about proof. That trust built over a decade doesn't vanish because someone younger wants your chair. That names typed into contract clauses matter more than names scribbled on whiteboards. That reputation, real, quiet, earned reputation, doesn't need a title to survive. It just needs one moment to show why it mattered in the first place. Mitch never replied to my email, but a day later, I got a LinkedIn alert that he'd viewed my profile at 2:12 a.m. and 20 minutes after that. Dre and Lynn's offer doubled. They say power leaves quietly, but its absence echoes loud. 2 weeks passed, long enough for Barkley and Cole to finish licking their wounds, short enough for the bruises to still show. I had remained silent, publicly and professionally. No interviews, no LinkedIn posts, no cryptic tweets. Just disappeared. A ghost in kitten heels, humming with purpose. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning at 9:01 a.m. sharp, the press release dropped. Dre and Lind and Creighton Financial, joint announcement. We are thrilled to welcome Alan Coulson as head of transition architecture. Alan brings a decade of strategic expertise in compliance pivoting, client migrations, and merger readiness. Her leadership will anchor upcoming transitions for our partner firms. No fanfare, no photos, just a text-based release with crisp white background and black serif font. 1 paragraph, 2 sentences. But the markets? They noticed. Creighton stock ticked up 3.7% before lunch. Dre and Lynn's phones rang off the hook. By the next morning, 3 mid-tier compliance firms had publicly congratulated me, without naming me. Just thinly veiled references to strategic realignment talent and compliance clarity leadership. Barkley and Cole's value dropped 11% in 5 trading days, not because of me, because of what it meant. A signal that their most stable asset, client trust had evaporated, and they had no one left to rebuild it. Inside the firm, nobody used my name. But I lived in every hallway whisper, every risk meeting, every folder still locked by my protocols. The junior staff now called it the Claws Collapse, like a legend, like a storm nobody saw coming. Ethan stopped showing up entirely. His podcast went permanently offline. The firm erased his headshot from the partner wall without ceremony, like he'd never existed. Some said he was in talks with a fintech startup in Austin. Others said he'd retreated to a cabin in Vermont with a sabbatical journal. I didn't care. Mitch, on the other hand, did something unexpected. He ordered a full audit of every client contract in active circulation, brought in outside counsel, assigned 2 partners to read through legacy clauses, one by one, like he was sifting through the rubble of his own house, trying to find the blueprint he burned. One of those partners, a woman named Dana I'd mentored back when she was still typing client names in lowercase, reached out. No ask, no strings, just a message. "We should have listened sooner. Hope you're where you deserve to be." I was. My new office wasn't huge. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. The door said Colson in polished steel letters. The window overlooked the water. And the first file I opened wasn't about a merger. It was about rebuilding a compliance model that didn't just protect firms, but people. The ones who never chased attention, the ones who just did the work. In the silence that followed, I found something rare. A second beginning, not as an employee or an asset, but as someone finally trusted to lead. And I didn't need a spotlight, just a contract. And my name exactly where it belonged. They tried to erase me, scrubbed my name from the team site, deleted my old internal bios, reassigned my inbox to Compliance General. The usual ritual, digital exile in 4 easy steps. But what they couldn't erase, the one thing that stayed welded into their systems like bone, was the folder. It still sits there, buried inside their secure archive vault under the same naming convention I built from scratch a decade ago. Client Readiness Protocol, A. Colson. Locked. Untouchable. IT flagged it during a quarterly cleanup, tried to override permissions, and got a block message from a server they didn't even know was active. They escalated to legal. Legal read the metadata, the trace signatures, and quietly marked it. Do not alter. Risk locked. It doesn't contain any files. No secrets, just a shell. A skeleton key with no door left to open. But it pulses. Reminds them, like a scar from a cut you swore didn't matter until it healed in the shape of a lesson. I never built it for drama. It wasn't a trap or some clever revenge egg, it was a precaution. A final protocol in case the firm ever lost sight of what mattered. Turns out, it wasn't the folder that mattered. It was the fact they knew better than to delete it. And Mitch, he reviews every client contract now. Personally. With 2 highlighters, yellow for deadlines, red for clauses. He brings them home in binders, I hear. Reads them like prayer, late into the night, hoping for salvation in fine print. Some say he hasn't mentioned Ethan's name in months, but he made one change. Every incoming partner at Barkley & Cole, no matter how golden their resume, how viral their TEDx talk, how firm their handshake, is handed a packet during onboarding. Tucked behind the NDA beneath the welcome memo is a single page from the Creighton file. Clause 22.1, they're told to read it out loud. I didn't ask for that. I didn't suggest it. No one contacted me. It just happened. A ritual born from failure. They don't say my name in that room, but I am there. In the silence before the words. In the caution wrapped around each syllable. In the contract that reminds them that names mean something. That trust, once fractured, calcifies into caution. That systems remember what people try to forget. I've moved on. Built something new, but I know, on some level, they're still learning from the version of me they underestimated. Not because I shouted, because I wrote everything down.